Glenn, I want to thank everyone at NIAA. I also want to thank the organizing committee, and I want to thank everyone that had to do with anything involved with this modern miracle we call American agriculture. What you do, what you represent for the clients, the industries you work for, the industries you work with, is nothing short of remarkable. I had the opportunity to visit 23 countries last year, and I assure you, those involved in agriculture production still look to what we do in America as leaders and as organizations and people that know how to produce food safely and affordably. And I think a big hats off and thank you to everyone and your clients, those people you work with and represent in terms of what you do. Now, as Glenn said, Dr. Barr and Dr. Frank did a wonderful job, I think, yesterday setting the stage with a lot of figures in terms of what this world is going to look like in the future and the challenges that we have as agriculturalists to provide safe, affordable food to the masses, not only here in the U.S., but around the globe as well. About 4 years ago, our president, Dr. Jeff Simmons, authored an article taking into consideration much of the data that you saw Dr. Barr talk about yesterday. And really, from a messaging standpoint, there are three key numbers, ladies and gentlemen, that I think it's worth remembering. First of all, 50 in the year 2050, 100, we will need 100% more food, and 70. 70% of that food will have to come from advancements in technology, because the fact of the matter is there ain't no more land. There is no more water. We will have to take advantage of the technology we have. It will have to be safe. It will have to be affordable. It will have to be acceptable. But that's going to be the key to feeding a very hungry world going forward in the future. Now again, Dr. Barr talked a lot about some of the data that we have, but I think Mr. Gates puts it very well when he said farmers increase their productivity, nutrition is improved, and hunger and poverty are reduced. So how do you define technology? It's any practice, it's any product, or it's any genetic improvement that contributes to efficiency. Efficiency can also contribute to affordability in terms of foodstuffs and food in general. But I think the one thing that we often miss in production agriculture, technology also contributes to producer profitability. Those people that can and do take advantage of technology can become more efficient and ultimately more profitable. That will also help them address hunger in terms of what they do. Once again, the miracle that is modern agriculture production today relies on technology, and we have a wonderful legacy of adopting safe technology. If you look back at World War II, and you look at what we have done in terms of productivity since that time, it's nothing short of remarkable. The challenge will be we have to do it again, but we will have to do it with a decreasing world in terms of resources available to us. So, what does technology do? But what is the world going to look like? I need to give my friend Neil Dirks, the executive at the National Pork Producers Council, credit for this picture. And I kind of deal better in pictures than numbers, so you're going to see some pictures here and some figures that will mainly characterize the issue that we're dealing with. This is the world as it exists today. What Neil did, he asked their economists at NPPC to assume that the population expansion to 9 billion people in 2050, if you could give everybody an additional 3 square meters of space to live in the country that they're going to be in 2050, what would the world look like? This is what that world will look like in 2050. It looks a lot different. Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, certainly India and China. Don't underestimate North America. We will continue to grow. We will need safe, affordable food. So it is going to be very challenging when we look at the emerging markets that they have safe food with which they can sustain themselves and generations to come. Now, another way to look at this is to look at this from the standpoint of the numbers as it relates to pictures. There's going to be 206,000 more mouths to feed every day. That's like creating another Philadelphia every week. If you take that to a broader sense and you think, what happens every month? That's another 6.3 million people. That's an additional Los Angeles and Chicago on the face of this earth every month that we're going to have to feed going forward. And to me, it's quite remarkable, quite daunting, but I also think very doable. If you look at the demographic makeup, and this was some work that was done by the United Nations along with the Australia Meat Institute, if you look at the developed world, in other words, North America, Western Europe, Japan, and you look at the population, we talk about the graying of America. Well, the rest of the world in the developed countries is also graying. We don't have a lot of youth in the developed countries. When you look at the developing countries, though, it is quite a different story. Now, the differences are really subtle, so take a close look. You might miss it. This is the developing world. Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, India, China, Southeast Asia, Brazil. When you look at the makeup of the world, they are much younger. Their economic viability is becoming stronger and stronger all the time. And when that happens, their appetite for meat, milk, eggs, and protein continues to grow. So the need for technology and the need for safe, affordable food continues to grow. In Indianapolis, I live in a neighborhood that, quite frankly, is predominantly Jewish. And I have a lot of Jewish friends there in the neighborhood, and they are very active in terms of the community and looking at global issues. And my next-door neighbor, he was in charge of some work they do at their synagogue to bring in speakers from Israel. And they brought in a gentleman to speak to our neighborhood Jewish association, and he was retired General Chaim Bar-Lev. He was the strategic planning general for the Israeli Defense Forces. Spoke at my neighbor's house next door, and he said something that I found just very, very interesting. He certainly talked about the threats from Iran, the threats from Syria, the Arab Spring, and all that was going on in the Middle East. But the one thing he said that caught my attention, he said, as the strategic planning arm of the IDF, the thing that they were most concerned about in the last 10 years was food security. And he says right now in Egypt, he said it's been massively underreported, but they are in a very tenuous position in terms of food and food availability. He said over time, with that fertile ground for extremist views, food and food issues is one of the things that they are most concerned about. So, if you take that backdrop and you look at the rising demand for meat, we're going to have another 3 billion people that are going to try to move into the middle class. And history has shown that as people's economic station improves, their appetite for meat, milk, eggs, and protein continue to grow. And we cannot have economic stability without food security. So we have got to continue to be able to adopt, develop, and utilize technology in order to make that happen. Now, we believe that technology will enable 3 rights. First of all, the right for basic human food. The right of every human being on this earth for food. Secondly, the right of choice. We pay a lot of attention to consumers, and as customers of ours, that's important. We need to. But the need for choice for consumers to purchase how food was produced and what it was produced with, but also making sure we ensure the right of producers to have access to technology to produce that food is extremely critical. And then finally, sustainability. Certainly that has something that has come into vogue in the last 10 years, but I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a passing fad. When you look at the top retail organizations in the United States today, they all have concerns about sustainability and how our food and food products were produced. That is a basic right that we're going to have to address going forward to 2050. Now, let's talk about that food issue first. Hidden hunger in industrialized society is something that we don't really hear much about. What we hear about are the millions and millions of people that die monthly from hunger. And that equates to 60 jumbo jets falling out of the sky every day. If 60 jumbo jets fell out of the sky every day, do you think we'd be a little concerned? Do you think we'd be doing something about it? Yeah, we would. That's how many people die of hunger. But even beyond that, the bane of hidden hunger. If you look at what's going on with hidden hunger, those people that just don't get enough to eat and as human beings maybe cannot function properly, or go through the day hungry, it's 2 out of 5 in Great Britain. It's 1 out of 8 in France. It's 1 out of 7 in Japan. And it's 1 out of 5 in this country. I mean, I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. We hosted the Super Bowl. Very proud of that. And someone asked me one day, you know, when we got into this hunger thing about 5 or 6 years ago, he said, Brian, do you know hungry people? I don't. I don't know hungry people. And I would ask you the same question. Do you know any people that don't get enough to eat? I don't really know them. My wife works in the Read Up program in the Indianapolis Public School. And she gets exposed to little children every day. There are 25,000 kids that come through the Indianapolis Public School every day that don't have enough food to eat. She reads to a 10-year-old little girl every week. And in December, the little girl had tears in her eyes one day, and she said, Miss Pat, the next time you come, can you bring me something to eat? Boy, that'll hit you. And when you think about food insecurity, it really strikes home when you see stories like that. But not only do we have people dying, we have people that are food insecure across the globe. So the right to food is something that's very basic, very important, that technology can and will address. Now, you have countries around the world, their governments are taking action. The example I like to cite, a couple of them. First of all, China. 4 years ago, the Premier of China said, I have a vision that I would like every Chinese child to have 300 grams of dairy product every day in order to improve their health and well-being. Well, if you compare that to what we have here in the U.S., ladies and gentlemen, we consume about 700 grams of dairy products here in the U.S. So if the Chinese people were to be able to move from 100 grams, which is what they consume today, to 300 grams, what they would have to do is add 4 more U.S. dairy herds to their production capabilities, given current production practices and current uses of technology. Now, if any of you have been to China, you know that they are not overly blessed with natural resources, land, feedstuffs, or water. So to be able to do that would be a significant drag on their land and water resource base. So their appetite and need and desire to have technology is extremely critical, something that they're very interested in. If you look at other countries and you look at how they have adopted technology, you can see why we have such a low percentage of our income that goes towards food. I had the opportunity to have an audience here about a year ago with the Minister of Agriculture in India. Arguably, next to the Prime Minister, probably the second most important person in that country. He made 2 very, very clear points to us. He said, first of all, we recognize that half of our population's income has to go to food. That's unacceptable. You'll see in the chart that's equivalent to what we were at 100 years ago. He said, that's unacceptable. The other thing is unacceptable is we don't want to have to rely on you to have to feed us or other countries. We want to be able to feed ourselves. I get that and I understand that. So their interest in acquiring safe, affordable technology to make food available, that food right to their people, is something that they're very interested in and are moving forward aggressively to address. You look at our litany of advancement in technology. This is the example of how productive we've gotten as a result of adopting safe, affordable technology here in the U.S. in the dairy industry. And you go back to the late 30s and you look at all the things that we've adopted, starting with artificial insemination on up to recently with sex semen and rumensin for lactating cows. A long litany of very acceptable, progressive products that have contributed to food security in this country and food affordability. Since the end of World War II, sticking with the dairy theme, 26 million cows at the height of World War II. Today, we are producing 58% more milk from 64% fewer cows. Quite remarkable. Quite remarkable. Now, let's go to that second issue, consumer choice. The choice to put into your mouth what you choose to. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe there's a more sacred personal choice that any of us make than what we put in our mouths or what we put in our families' mouths. It's a very personal choice. But I think when you think about the Consumer today, they are bombarded, as we have talked in several of the breakouts and general sessions this week, with a lot of information. They are very interested too. If you look at a technology company like us, the days are over when you could develop, run a few university trials, get FDA approval, and start marketing a product. We can't do that anymore. There are a lot of stakeholders in the food industry that want to know about our technologies. Consumers get bombarded daily with a lot of negative images of what we do so well. And as Dr. Barr mentioned yesterday, only 2% of us really have an understanding of that connection between the human and animal bond. Circle of life issues. We understand and we know how and where food comes from, as opposed to 98% of the other population that never was involved in food animal production in any way. In fact, just to prove the point, this is a bad geeky. This is Roxy. Roxy, along with her predecessor Beasley, is my 24-year-old daughter's orientation to the human-animal bond. Now, my daughter Paige, she loves a steak, she loves a pork chop, she loves hamburgers just as much as anybody, but she just doesn't have a clue as to where food comes from. This is her orientation. I took the opportunity to take her out to a 300 South Faro to Finish operation in Iowa that was very close to my mom and dad's, and you know what? She thought that was great. She had no idea how pork or pork products were produced. And it was an eye-opener to her. But that's our orientation, and that's the orientation of a lot of people today. The orientation of a lot of us, I'm sure, was like mine, and that's what's exhibited here in this picture. We were actively involved in production. A lot of consumers today certainly haven't been, so we need to make sure we can articulate our messages about how we produce food and how good choices can be made as far as safe, affordable food with technology. We need to think about how we articulate those messages. Now, we've done a lot of work with consumer research. In fact, we employed 5 researchers to work with the Nielsen organization to look at good, credible consumer research across the globe that can give us an idea as to what consumers' attitudes are, but even just as importantly, how do they behave? Because what they say and what they do may be 2 different things as it relates to their choice and how they select food and food products. So what we did, we had 28 studies analyzed from 26 countries that involved 97,000 consumers. These studies were done in the decades of the 2000s. We looked at their opinions and their attitudes, but we also looked at how they spent their money and how they bought food. What we found was that there is a category, and we have found this over and over again, and Nielsen has substantiated this here in the U.S. There's a group of people that we'll call them food buyers. They care about 3 things: taste, nutrition, and cost. And they consistently make their choices based on those 3 points. Now, there's another 4% of the people out there, they have some lifestyle things that they like. They like organic, or they may make food choices based on some religious preferences, or they may like locally grown or farmers market. And you know what? That's okay. They still want to make sure they can get food affordably and safely. And we have found in our studies that they are very accepting of technology. So this amounts to about 99% of those consumers out there. There is also a group that we would call the fringe. They are interested in food bans. They're interested in restrictions. They're interested in propositions. They are interested not only in what they eat, but they want you. They want to be able to dictate to you what you eat. They're organized. They deal with emotion. They don't always have the facts on their side. But I think there are also, we should be comforted to know that there are 99% of the people out there that are very comfortable with the food and food choices that they have today. We talk a lot about the consumer. We can get concerned about the consumer, and we should. They're our customer. But I feel pretty comfortable the more data I see that consumers make pretty good choices, and they recognize what we do. They have questions, sure. Therefore, our messages to them need to be clear. But there is that minority position out there that is trying to change that minority's choice. Interesting comments from the chairman of the Nestle Corporation, largest food company in the world. You have to be rational. There's no way you can support life on Earth if you go back straight from the farm to the table. And again, as I said, nothing is more personal than what you put in your mouth. However, there are implications with how food is produced. And unless we can do it in the most efficient manner, we will not have enough natural resources to be able to do it. Case study in the UK. They have made choices. They were historically a major food producer and exporter. Within the last 8 to 10 years, they have made choices societally and regulatory-wise to say you cannot use these technologies, you cannot use these production practices in order to produce food, livestock. And with any decision, there are consequences. Well, what has happened in the UK, 60,000 lost farm jobs in the last 10 years. If you look at the amount of meat they've had to import, nearly 400% increase. Farm incomes have dropped 71%. Dairy imports up 132%. Bottom line, folks, in the last 3 years, they cannot feed themselves. They're a net importer of food. If you talk about an issue of national security based on the choices we make, they've made a choice that has implications. I shared this same slide at the European Dairy Union Association meeting in Brussels, or excuse me, in Luxembourg last fall. It got pretty quiet in the room. It got pretty quiet. And that was a pretty friendly audience, but I think they understand more and more the implications of the choices they're making in Western Europe about how food is produced and what technology can be made available. Okay, finally, sustainability. I think the big growing right that we need to continue to talk about. Dr. Jason Clay, World Wildlife Fund. To feed 9 billion people and maintain the planet, we must freeze the footprint of food. And if you go back and look at how we have adopted technology here in the U.S., because of the technology adoption we've made, we produce beef with 14% less water and 34% less land than what we did in 1977. Dairy, 64% less water than in 1944 with a 63% smaller carbon footprint. That's a heck of a story. That is a great story to tell about what we do and how we do it. And it enables that sustainability right. Again, if you look at the litany of what we've done to adopt technology in the U.S., we have a wonderful story to tell. We really do. To freeze the footprint of livestock, new technology will provide improved animal welfare, prevent controlled disease, improve nutrient utilization, and enable improved nutrient digestibility. And the new technology results in improved animal productivity, which means better affordability and less lean on planet Earth. Okay, to summarize, our message. Technology equals safe, affordable, abundant food. That's our message. Now, one thing I would challenge you with, that I challenge all groups with, what is your message? We talk about the need to tell our story. But I really think that each of us in agriculture need to have our story we tell. You know, being on an airplane every week, I have the invariable discussion with the person next to you. What do you do? Well, what do you do? And then it ultimately gets to the questions, you mean you really do use antibiotics in feed to feed animals? You really use hormones to produce milk? And I say, yes, I do, and let me tell you why. For this reason, and this reason. It's like, whoa, I guess I never thought of that. But that's a message I've had to get more comfortable delivering, and the first time, it's tough. And we often get accused of saying, well, you know, you're preaching to the choir. Well, the choir needs to do more preaching. Whether it's at your school, at your church, with your neighbor, tell the great story that we have accomplished here. It won't always work. But practice telling the story. Find your message. Our target, to make sure that these three rights are understood and the importance of technology is understood. We have settled on a strategy to look out for the top 500 influencers of food decisions and food choice here in this country. They may be members of retail organizations, but they have it in their power to choose whether or not technologies are used in production. You may also be talking to people that are working for food magazines, food press, people that are in a position to influence consumers. Everyone says, well, we've got to talk to consumers. Guess what? We've got a pretty scientific message that may not always be easily understood. We have to rely on these people that make decisions on behalf of consumers that consumers trust. So that's what our focus has been. Our number one priority is to innovate. We will need to continue to come up with the innovative technologies that we have in the last 50 years. We've got to do that in spades over the next 50 years. And then finally, our team. And again, this is one company, but we have gotten such passion around this issue of food and hunger and technology that among the things that we've done, we have given every employee in Elanco Animal Health a half a day off per quarter to go work on a hunger initiative. Whether it's to work at the local food pantry, speaking at your local Rotary Club, filling backpacks with food for underprivileged children. It's something we believe in. It's something that we say, if you want a good, committed organization, and we're about food, you will get a high level of engagement when you get up in the morning and you go to work for a cause. I work for Big Pharma, a drug company. We haven't always been the most popular industry in the world. When you have a group of people that get up and go to work knowing that they're helping address hunger and sustainability around the globe, you get high levels of engagement, and it makes people feel really good about what they do. Finally, our vision is food and companionship enriching life. The 3 rights will enable people to have access to safe, affordable food. So, choice, making sure people have the choice. We can't overreact to the fringe. Technology does enable the 3 rights. Let the regulatory bodies do their thing. It may sound a little funny coming from somebody that works for a drug company, but guess what? The best friend that we have right now is the FDA. As I go around the globe, they are still the envy of the world in terms of regulatory work. And I think they see the need just as we do. So they are becoming better and more effective in terms of our opinion to work with. And then influencing those 500. Who are those people? What are their organizations? And how can they influence the adoption and the use of safe, affordable technology? I would challenge you to join the dialogue. There is a website you can go to. It's called plentytothinkabout.org. And at that website, you can blog your thoughts and feelings about hunger, about technology. You can also gain access to the white paper that Mr. Simmons published about 4 years ago that goes into more depth about some of the topics I've talked about here today. And it also has a couple of videos with Jeff Simmons talking about the 3 rights. Again, thank you so much for what you do in this miracle that's agriculture. You should be proud of what you do, and please, tell your story, because you got a great story to tell. Thank you.